G'day everybody, my name is Elliot Waters and you're listening to the Dysregulated Podcast. As always, thank you for tuning in. Alright, today's episode is all about medication emergency. I have had some problems having access and being able to use two of my medications, two of my meds that I really need to help be able to get through the things I need to do throughout the day. So that's a little hint as to what I'm talking about. Now, this is the story. If you get a mood chart of mine, I've said this a lot on the podcast, maybe not recently, but it still rings true today. If you get a mood chart of mine and then overlay podcast episode output, a chart of that, overlay that, you'll see there's a direct relationship, it appears, between my mood being good and lots of episodes being produced, and when I'm in a real low mood, not many episodes are getting produced at all. So recently my mood has dropped big time because of my inability to use two of my prescribed medications and my ability to hone my focus on the things I need to be attending to and to follow through with the things that I need to do. My ability to do that has been severely hindered as well because these two medications haven't been available to me. So there's a little hint as to what I'm talking about. Some of you will be going, hey, I get that too, especially of those of you with ADHD. This may sound very familiar, this story. But I want to make it clear this time, though, it wasn't my fault. So in the past, I'll admit I've gone above and beyond maybe my prescribed dosages in an effort to be able to get more things done during the day, okay? I'm not saying it's the right thing to do, but at the same time, that's why I've done it. Not because of any sort of, I want to feel high, I want to feel euphoric and amazing. It's got nothing to do with that at all. It is because there are times when my inner critic often, and the workaholic within, say I've achieved nowhere near enough during the day to be able to relax. So therefore I have this pressure to achieve more. And to do that, I'll do whatever it takes. And that includes going above my prescriptions every now and then. So sometimes at the end of those prescriptions, especially for these two medications in particular, I find myself a little bit short and there is a period of time where I have to go without the medications until I get my new scripts. But as I said, this time it wasn't my fault. I'm going to explain all of that in a minute. But before I do, I just want to say as well that at the end of this episode, seeing as though we're talking about medications and drugs, I'm going to pass judgment very quickly over the comments made by US President Donald Trump regarding the use of paracetamol or acetaminophen, as it's called in the US. And let me tell you, it took me a long time to be able to pronounce that word, acetaminophen. Acetaminophen. Hang on, I've got this up specifically. If you can hear this, let's see it. Acetaminophen, right, acetaminophen. Anyway, I may call it just paracetamol from here on out because it's a lot easier for me to pronounce. Interestingly enough, Donald Trump had troubles pronouncing it as well. But anyway, so I'm going to look very briefly at this claim that paracetamol or Panadol, Tylenol, whatever you want to call it, that there's a link between using those medications, those drugs, and the development of autism in the unborn child. So this is a pregnant mother who, for example, may have a fever, takes the Tylenol or the Panadol. What are the chances that that child may be exposed, theoretically, to this drug and then develop autism? So I'm going to evaluate that. I've had a little look at the research. I think I know roughly what's going on, so I'll pass judgment on that at the end of the episode. But first, let's talk about my medication emergency, which is two of my meds. So what I'm talking about are the stimulants. The stimulants, dexamphetamine and Vyvanse. If you've listened to this show long enough, I'm sure you would have known what meds I was going to talk about without probably even pressing play. If you saw the title, Medication Emergency, and you've been listening for a while, you probably thought, here we go. He's run out of his stimulants again. Typical. And I did, but it wasn't my fault. So the problem is with these medications is that they're highly restricted, tightly controlled, and very regulated across the world. And Australia is no different. So this includes, so I'm talking stimulant meds. So that includes, for me, dexamphetamine and Vyvanse, or lisdexamphetamine, the long-acting version. But this same sort of, this occasion also rings true often for those who are prescribed Ritalin or Concerta, methylphenidate, Adderall, Dexedrine, doesn't matter. Stimulant medications that are used for ADHD across the world are tightly controlled. So that means that I can't just go get new scripts for these medications whenever I need or feel like I need to, or whenever I want. There is no flexibility really around that at all. You've got to do it in the right ways, okay? So, for example, my antidepressants, clomipramine, if I lose my script or something, I can just get a new script for it from the GP. Easy, no worries at all, because it is, although it is restricted, it's not a medication that is associated with any forms of, abuse or addiction potential, there's dependency, but that's a different story. But you know what I mean? You don't have a whole stack of clomipramine or mirtazapine or, to get high. You can't do it. There's no such thing. So the risk is nowhere near as high, whereas the stimulants, as we know, amphetamine, for a lot of them, amphetamine-based, definitely there is that abuse potential. So that's why it's highly restricted across the world, which is fair enough. It's fair enough. And it's a system that needs to be in place. But unfortunately, things can go wrong. So to get these medications to begin with in Australia, traditionally you've had to see a psychiatrist. Now you can see your GP, and very soon in New South Wales, your GP will be able to also diagnose and then prescribe without having to go see a psychiatrist or without having to have a letter of authority from a psychiatrist. I'll explain more about that in a minute. But traditionally, it's been very hard to get these medications, these prescriptions in the first place because you had to see a psychiatrist. Now, I can tell you right now, here in Newcastle, which is New South Wales' second largest city behind Sydney, there are no psychiatrists that have their books open. It's just it hasn't been for ages. The demand far outweighs supply. So people in Newcastle, such as myself, have had to look to Sydney to gain access to these medications. Thank goodness for telehealth, or being able to see your doctor over your computer or over the phone, because that has made access to psychiatry a lot easier for people, even if I don't particularly agree completely with this idea of telehealth. I don't like it because I don't want to digress too much, but I don't know if you guys agree, but if you've seen a psychologist or a psychiatrist, I much prefer to see both in person, because, there's communication that comes from non-verbal aspects, like how you're presenting as far as the clothes that you're wearing or personal hygiene or, like rounded shoulders and body language is what I was trying to think of, eye contact being made, and because that can be a sign of autism, for example. There's a lot of these non-verbal cues that I think need to be looked at holistically to get the picture of the person correct. And if you do things over telehealth, I don't think you can get that complete picture. But at the same time, seeing a psychiatrist over telehealth is better than not seeing a psychiatrist at all. I wouldn't personally ever do psychotherapy over the phone or over the internet because I really think psychologists need to see the whole picture. Psychiatrists maybe less so, but even, they sort of need to as well. But anyway, as I said, it's better to see psychiatrists via telehealth than not seeing a psychiatrist at all. So that's what I do. I see psychiatrists from Sydney over telehealth, and that's how I get access to my medications. It's also difficult too, because there's a huge cost involved. The options are what I do. I had to get another ADHD assessment because doctors don't like prescribing these medications without doing assessments themselves. So that initial assessment to tell me what I already knew, which was I had ADHD, $850, and then subsequent appointments are $350. So that's a lot of money, and money is a big reason why people don't see psychiatrists. which is hard because ADHD can make working hard. So, if someone can't work because of their ADHD, they can't afford to see psychiatrists and they can't afford to help fix their ADHD so they can go to work, so they can afford their psychiatrist. You get the picture. Anyway, I'm thankfully able just to be able to see a psychiatrist for my ADHD and get those medications as I need. Now, if you're on in New South Wales, before the new rules have started to come in where GPs can administer medications from the get-go and diagnose ADHD, not just psychiatrists. But traditionally, what I've had to do is see psychiatrists to get my scripts. Very, very expensive. So what you can do after 12 months, if your prescriptions are solid, are stable, dosages are not going up or down, your psychiatrist can write a letter of authority to your GP, and then your GP is able to prescribe these medications in those dosages, at those dosages. And that's what's happened to me most recently. So this has been the first time I've had to get my new prescriptions for the stimulants from my GP. I haven't done it before, so I wasn't sure if it was going to work. So what I did was the right thing. Because usually, this is on me. I don't do my appointments. I don't get them in on time. Too late to try and make an appointment, so the doctor's late. I run out and I have a bit of time without medications because you can't get stimulants early. You can't go to the chemist and say, I need a week's supply because I've run short. Some medications, they will do that. They definitely will not do that for Schedule 8s, like the stimulants or the pain medications like endone and oxycodone, all them. No chance. You need your scripts from your doctor. So you've got to be on time with these things, or else you run the risk of having some time forced upon you without your meds, which is exactly what's happened to me. But this is the thing, everybody. Ladies and gentlemen, again, I'm going to say it again. This wasn't my fault, all right? This was not my fault. I'm laughing now because I got the medications back. Can't you tell? That's why I'm doing this episode. But it's true. It wasn't my fault this time because I had my appointment booked right at the end of the 6 months, because there's 6-month duration scripts. You can't get any longer. They're 6 months. That's the rule. So you've got to get your doctor's appointment in right at the end of the 6 months, because you can't have it too early either, or else they'll say, no, you're not allowed to get your script. It's too early. So you've got to plan it really well, which is very difficult for people often with ADHD. It is for me, but this time I did plan it right. I had the GP appointment booked. I had the letter of authority sent from my psychiatrist to the GP. I knew my doctors had been in contact. I made sure of that. So it was all sorted, ready to go. And then disaster struck in the form of me getting a phone call from my doctor's office saying, unfortunately, something has come up and your doctor has had to take some leave, and we don't have another appointment for you for another 3 weeks. Would you like to take that one? And of course I said yes. That was the soonest I could get in, 3 weeks. And I was like, oh my goodness, that's bad. Now, I didn't ask my doctor what happened. Usually when the unexpected leave comes up, it's not usually a good thing. So there's no blaming him. I'm not blaming my doctor, my GP or anything. I didn't ask any questions because it's not my place. But what happened was I had to wait an extra 3 weeks, and that was not good because my script ran out 3 weeks before that because I timed it to perfection, or so I thought. But things can happen, see? Things can happen. I knew something was going to happen because I'm never this, on top of things. And I leading up to the appointment, I kept thinking something's going to happen here. I've just got this feeling something's going to happen because this is all too easy. I've done this too well. This doesn't happen to Elliot, And usually a lot of those thoughts have got no logic to them, and, you just try and dismiss them, flick them out of your head because it's just garbage. I'm not attending to that. But, some of them get through, and then unfortunately this happened, and then all of a sudden those thoughts are like, see, told you so, told you something would happen. Anyway, you can't do much about it. These things happen. But what the result was me without my stimulant meds for 2 to 3 weeks there. And that's why I've been missing from the podcast for a little bit, because I haven't been able to focus on getting these episodes done, which has been difficult because without the stimulants, I'm very anxious because I know that my ability to do the things that I need to do is severely hampered. That is stressful. So me not doing the Q&A sessions episode, for example, and me not being able to interview people yet for the intake interviews, that, and there's other things too, of course, but relating to the podcast, the stress has just been building and building and building. And when I'm anxious, my ability to attend to things is even worse. So not only was my ability to do the things I need to do severely hampered by not having the stimulant medication to hone my focus, unfortunately, the result was even worse because then the anxiety and the stress that had kicked up because I wasn't able to do things then made my ability to attend even worse. So everything went out the window. So as a result, my car turned into a mess. My bedroom turned into a mess. I was disorganized with other appointments that I had. I was not, as we know, producing podcast episodes like I had told you guys I would. Everything sort of fell apart and went to hell for a little bit there. Because also the other point is that when you stop these medications abruptly, there's these rebound effects, and all of a sudden the negative effects of the disorder, ADHD, that these stimulant meds are looking at and attending to themselves, there's the rebound effects, and all of a sudden those symptoms and behaviours and thoughts are amplified because of the sudden loss of the medication that was, really the foundation of, every day that I was doing things. So there's that rebound effect and things actually get worse than they should be. And it's just so difficult. It's very difficult to manage, and the stimulants, not only are they there for me as far as, my executive functioning goes, but there is an effect of the amphetamine on my mood as well. So my mood dropped big time because I was very anxious. And my anxiety, I knew, was actually, to a certain extent, valid because I wasn't able to do the things that I needed to do or felt like I needed to do. And when you're not able to do the things that you want to do and need to do, you don't just get stressed and anxious about it. You start getting pretty depressed about it as well. So my mood really flatlined for 2 to 3 weeks there. It's a shame I don't actually keep a mood chart anymore. I should. I definitely should. It's one of those things that, I know I should be doing, but I'm not. So unfortunately, I can't actually post a photo, for example, of what my mood chart looks like on social media for you guys to see. But I know that if I was doing it, there would be this sort of flatline effect over the last 2 to 3 weeks, and that there is a direct relationship, as far as I'm concerned, between that low mood and things like podcast episode output. So I did all the right things. I had my appointment booked, and then all of a sudden the appointment vanished, and I had to wait an extra 2 to 3 weeks, and that has caused all sorts of problems. But thankfully now I've got my scripts. I've got my prescriptions for Vyvanse. I've got my prescription for dexamphetamine. And it was through my GP, which is great because it's so much easier to see a GP than a psychiatrist. It's so much cheaper to see a GP than it is a psychiatrist. So this is going to work well, this system now from here on in, unless I need a dosage change. But the new laws that are coming into effect here in New South Wales and across the states and territories of Australia, I'm not sure about the rest of the world, but I'd say, Australia, we tend to follow, what Europe does. So you guys might already be able to do this sort of stuff. But soon your general practitioner will be able to do all the ADHD related stuff. And that's great because that opens up access for people because it's cheaper, it's easier to get on the books. Great stuff for people with ADHD in New South Wales at least. So there you go. Very frustrating, everybody. Very frustrating. I do apologise again for the fact that, in particular, that the Q&A sessions episodes haven't started rolling out yet. I'll be getting onto them as a top priority, and hopefully as well the intake interviews will take off. And now I feel a lot more comfortable doing those episodes, knowing that I've got the medications that I need, because I don't want to do a garbage job, like the intake interviews in particular. I'm here on the show very quickly. The idea is that I'm showcasing someone else's story. I don't mind as much if I, muddle up my own story, whatever, it's just me. But if I'm going to showcase someone else on the show, I want to do the best job I can. And to do the best job, I believe, and it's been determined, that I need these medications. Same with the Q&A sessions. These are your questions. I want to do your questions justice. I don't want to do a half-assed job of any of these episodes. So now that I've got the meds back, it's full steam ahead. Let's go. All right. Now, before I do go, very quickly, I want to make comment on the determinations and the conclusions that have been drawn up in the US by the President Donald Trump regarding the possible relationship between paracetamol or acetaminophen, I'm getting good at that word, Tylenol, Panadol, also known as the connection potentially between that drug and autism. This is the story. All right, let's see if I can put my science hat on here, because this is really a question that's more to do with how these research articles, the methodologies that's behind the research, that's more of what the focus is, to be honest, than the actual outcomes of these papers. So the older papers that I believe in the US they seem to be referencing mostly have shown a link between a pregnant woman taking these medications, Panadol, Tylenol, and then giving birth to a child that has developed autism. Okay, there were small, significant but small relationships found in earlier works between the use of Panadol or Tylenol and by the pregnant mother and then giving birth to an individual who has developed autistic spectrum disorder. Okay, small relationship there. But what these papers didn't do was account for all the confounds. So that's variables that influence the dependent variable. So that dependent variable is that the child is born with autism or develops autism. That's the dependent variable. The independent variable that has been assessed by these earlier papers is the use of paracetamol, Tylenol, Panadol by the mother during the pregnancy. Okay, that's the independent variable being looked at. But there's other variables that haven't been controlled for and accounted for. So, for example, what's the Panadol or the Tylenol? Why is that being used in the first place? Is it really a case that it's the Panadol or Tylenol that's causing this relationship, this link with autism? Or is it what it's controlling for, which is things like fevers and headaches and stuff like that? So that's the real question. And that's the question that I ask, because we know that, for example, a fever is not a good thing. Like it is in a sense to, get over infections and viruses and all that sort of stuff. But, having your body temperature high for long periods of time is not good. And it can cause problems with, proteins denaturing and, all this sort of stuff. And we know that an unborn child during pregnancy, if they're exposed to lots and lots of high levels due to of fever, because they're implicated in this as well. So if the mother has fevers for a long time, that can cause problems in a few different areas, not just autism or the potential for the development of autism. But we know fevers for a long time in a mother are not good for the unborn baby. We know this. So is this really a question of the Panadol that's being used to control the fever or the Tylenol? Which is it? Is it the introduction of the medication, or is it what it's actually trying to treat and it doesn't have anything to do with the medication? It's actually the fever component that's the problem. That's the first question. Another confound that has not been accounted for. So what else is Panadol and Tylenol used for? Pain. Now, what do we know about people with autism? We have, me being one of them, we report, on average, high levels of pain than somebody who doesn't have autism. Okay, so this might be a bit harder to sort of see, but the link, where I'm going with this. So the mother, right, let's imagine this, the mother has pain and is taking the paracetamol and the Tylenol for pain, okay? Right, so is it the pain that's causing the problem in the mother with the child, or I suppose a problem, if you want to call it that, or is it the Panadol, the medication, the Tylenol again, having a link to autism in the child. And this is where it gets a little bit more complicated, but more recent researchers suggest this, and this has been put forward by quite a few people, and I tend to agree with this, is that, remember, I said people with autism are more likely to be in pain. Mothers who are in pain more likely to take Tylenol, Panadol, have children autistic. Hang on. People who have pain, autistic people report high levels of pain. Mothers who are reporting pain have the Panadol or the Tylenol. What if the mothers who are in pain because they're autistic? And autistic people, as we know, are more likely to be in pain. So the question then is the mother autistic? We need to look at this research and these findings and ascertain what's going on there, if there's a relationship there. And we know that there is, because there is a huge genetic component to autism, 70 to 80% genetic component to someone developing autistic spectrum disorder. So if the mothers have got autism, they're more likely to have children who have autism. And mothers who are in pain, who have autism, are more likely to take things like Tylenol and Panadol for pain. And then, as a result of them being in pain because they're autistic, they have children who are more likely to be autistic, which is independent of the medication, of the drug. It's got nothing to do, in this case, this is my conclusion of some of the new research I've looked at, it's got nothing to do with the Panadols or the Tylenol. It's got everything to do with the fact that in this cohort, the mother is more likely to be autistic. So, in a way. So what that means is that, yes, the older research has shown a link between high use levels and long uses of Panadol and paracetamol and Tylenol and acetaminophen. But the reasons for taking the drug in the first place, that is probably where the connection to autism lies. And that could be high levels of fever, of other sickness in the mother, which can cause issues during pregnancy, not just related to autism, or the big one, which is that autistic mothers tend to be in pain and therefore take these medications and tend to have children who are autistic because of that huge genetic link. I just want to say too, quickly, there was another, this is a real good one, another research paper I found. This one's been reported quite a bit. It's from Sweden. Those Scandinavian countries are great when it comes to this sort of research. So what they did, now I've only briefly read it, but essentially the Swedish researchers followed 2.8 million children and determined whether they would develop autism. So it was siblings, right? Siblings. So they looked at pairings. So one sibling, say the daughter, during pregnancy was exposed to paracetamol or acetaminophen, and then the sister or brother was not exposed to these medications, okay? So there were all these pairs that they looked at. Sister, brother, brother, sister, whatever, different combinations. But what's really important is one of the siblings, could be the oldest, could be the youngest, one of the siblings was exposed to paracetamol or acetaminophen, and the other sibling was not exposed during pregnancy. And this is a good research paper because it's looking at siblings. And this is important because siblings share a lot of genetic material. So there's the genetic link between two. So that controls for that genetic link. It's controlled for because we're looking at siblings who have the genetic link. So that variable, that confound, well, it's not confound because we're controlling for it. So that variable is accounted for. The only thing that's now being looked at, the independent variable that's been focused on, is the paracetamol, acetaminophen, Tylenol, Panadol use. And what they found was there was no statistical significance of any relationship between the paracetamol group and the non-paracetamol group, the rates of autism. It didn't make an effect. There was no effect. It didn't matter. It wasn't an issue. So there you go. So that is the look at the research that I've found, at least, and a lot of it's being reported in the media. It should be noted as well, just quickly, that those earlier research papers that did find that link between the medication and autism, those that had the supposed link were taking massive amounts of the medication, which is not recommended by the makers of Tylenol or Panadol at all. So even in those sets of results, the conditions that the pregnant mother was under caused the amount of the medications to be used to be way above the max recommended dosages. So that suggests, one, anything in excess is not a good thing for anybody, especially not an unborn child or a pregnant mother. But the reasons why they might have been having so much of the painkiller could have been because their fevers were so bad and lasted for so long. And again, you've got to wonder, is it the fever that's causing the issue here? So there you go. I don't know if that clears things up at all, but that's my take on these massive claims that Panadol or Tylenol can cause autism. Like that's, autistic rates have definitely gone up. Part of it is because the definition of, autistic spectrum disorder is so broad now, whereas it never used to be. We're a lot more aware of autism and what it is and what it is and how it, manifests itself in people and in the environment. We know what to look for now, whereas we didn't before. I think that accounts for a lot of the uptake or the uptick of people diagnosed with autism. Like, for example, when I was a kid, I was never told I had Asperger's or autism. That actually only came along when I was, later in life. When I was 28, I think it was, when I was finally diagnosed with autistic spectrum disorder. So that in itself is a bit of an indicator that earlier on that these things weren't really picked up on. It's taken until more recently for mental health professionals to be able to understand autism a lot better and then have the confidence and the ability to be able to diagnose. So I guess my example is a bit of an example of that. So I think that's a big part of it. I also think there's a lot of, there is potential for things like, like plastics in the water and stuff. We don't know what that's causing and what that's doing, but we know it's really, really not good for anybody, and it's a big problem. So that may be also part of this story. But again, it's very genetic. So, there are more people being diagnosed, but then if you go back and look at their parents, you would find another massive cohort that maybe haven't been diagnosed as of yet, or maybe they are, and that's why the number's going up, because they now are showing signs as well, because we know what we're looking at. It's like, the parents were autistic the whole time, like Johnny's dad, who had the model train set, and sits at train platforms watching trains go by all day, which I'm not judging, by the way, because I do that too. Anyway, I don't have the model set anymore, but when I was a kid, I did. All the signs were there for me. But yeah, so more people are being diagnosed with it. It's not necessarily because more people have it than they used to. It's because we are more aware now that people have it and we're able to intervene and do things about it, all that sort of stuff. So that's the story there. So my apologies, everybody, for being a bit quiet when it comes to podcast output lately. I promise the Q&A sessions are coming. The intake interviews are coming. For those who want to be interviewed on the potty, let me know. I've sent some emails around to people now, and we're getting these episodes up to speed, and we're going to come up with something pretty cool and then produce these episodes and put them here on the show. And it's going to really showcase so many people's unbelievable stories of resilience and triumph despite it all. Like, you think my story is interesting. It's nothing compared to some of the people that will be coming on here, let me tell you. Anyway, that's it for now. If you're enjoying the show, feel free to like, subscribe, give the show a great rating, and you can share this show around with your mates, especially those who maybe are suffering from the effects of mental ill health, in particular those that maybe think that they're very alone on their journey. Feel free to show them this podcast, because I'd like to think that, this show does, allow people to see and understand that, mental ill health is a problem for a lot of us, but we're not going through this alone. We are in this together. Let's help each other out, and maybe passing this show around could be part of that. I don't know. You tell me. All right. Thank you, everybody, for listening. I do appreciate it. As always, you can follow me on Instagram as well at elliot.t.waters, amazing content. And you can follow the show on Facebook, which I'm now starting to ramp up the content on there as well, by searching for the Dysregulated Podcast. All right, I'm starting to not make sense, so I better go. Thank you, everybody. Have a good one, and I'll see you next time here on the Dysregulated Podcast.